Guys, it's time for another conversation with couples. This is our second one. If you missed the first one with the Masons, you need to go back and watch it. But today we have another great interview with another great couple, Tom and Gerri Hawes. They're a part of FBC Allen, and they've been here for quite a while. They're both super involved in ministry here and leadership, and not only in the church but also outside of the church. So they have a lot of great stuff to say, some great advice for couples. So take a listen, and I hope you enjoy it.
Well, hey guys, thanks for coming on and being a part of Conversation with Couples. You are couple number 2, so thanks for doing this.
Glad to do it.
So if you would, take just a second to introduce yourselves to everyone that's watching. Tell us about how long you've been married, kids, what they're up to, what you guys do for a living, all that kind of good stuff. Just give us a little quick bio about the both of you.
Okay, well, we're Tom and Gerri Hawes, and we've been married 29 years. We have 2 children. I have a daughter, Catherine, who is 22 and married last February and lives here with our son-in-law, Ben, and a son.
Not with us, lives in Allen.
Yeah, 4 miles away.
Sometimes that works. It has to work that way.
Yeah. And our son is, on Sunday, he turns 21, and he's a biblical studies major at Colorado Christian University in Lakewood, Colorado.
Awesome. And so tell me about yourselves and jobs, all that kind of good stuff.
Okay. So I work part-time. I have lots of ministry opportunities, both at church and in the community, and I'm very involved in those types of things. And I like to think of myself, I guess I'm an amateur landscape architect. That's, if I could do anything, that's what I play around at it. I love that. I love gardening. So that's my hobby.
Very cool.
She's very good at it. I tell people that I know she loves me, but sometimes I think she loves gardening more. But she's really more than an amateur. She's really, really good at it. Jimmy, I have my own business, and what I do is I create and facilitate executive roundtables for Christian CEOs. So service with the people that work with me, we service about 100 of them in Dallas-Fort Worth, and awesome. So that keeps me busy.
Well, good. And something I'll say to people watching, that you both are very involved here at our church and been at our church for a while. How many years have you guys been at FBC Allen?
Since 1994.
Okay.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, I'm not good at math, so I'm not going to even guess. But it's been a while, and they're both super involved in ministries here at our church, and thankful for their leadership. So we're here to talk about marriage, and we want to learn about your marriage, and hopefully by listening to a little bit of your story, we can learn some things that will help us in our stories as we do marriage together. So we like to start off with just some easy, fun stuff, and then we'll get to the deeper stuff. But who's the better driver, husband or wife, in this marriage?
You know, when we first got married, we had this debate a lot, but I think we've resolved it.
Okay, good.
Don't ask how.
You've come to a conclusion. Very good. Very good. Let's say, who said I love you first?
All right. August of 1990. I sort of remember where it was. Gerri used to live in an apartment over on Preston and Campbell, and we used to walk around the neighborhood. And I have a vague memory of where it was.
Very cool. Yeah, so how did you guys meet? How did you guys get to know one another and start dating?
Well, we both attended Prestonwood, and we had a Sunday school class. It was huge. I didn't know him from the class, but we had mutual friends, so met through mutual friends.
Very cool. And do you remember what y'all did on your first date, official date?
I do. Well, it's kind of odd because we met and we were part of an intramural softball team, which I was the coach. And I think this is a God thing, because that particular spring, it was a Friday night league. Every single game got rained out, every single one. And so it was my job as coach. I had to call every person, go, hey, this is pre-email, pre-internet.
Right.
I had to call every person. Hey, Bob, no game tonight. Okay, bye. Hey, Sally, it was a co-ed team. No,
Right.
no game tonight. Bye. And I would save Gerri for last.
Very cool.
And so we would speak more. And one Friday night, we said, well, how about we get some people and we go out? And she said, all right, I'll call some people. I said, I'll call some people. And none of the other people were available. And so we just went out. We don't call that our first date. Our first date came after that, where we went to an Italian place called Two Guys from Italy. And
Creative name.
Yeah, I know, it's a great name. And then we went to Malibu race cars.
Oh, so that's where you first got to see us driving.
Yeah.
I beat him then.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, she did. She beat me repeatedly.
Oh, very cool.
And I thought, that's cool. This is a woman that competes.
That's right. That's good.
I said, this is great. Let's see how this goes in the long term.
Right. Well, who's the best cook in the family?
Oh, I get to claim that one.
Yeah, I think Gerri. I do cook. I think she.
Okay. All right. Who's more time conscious?
I think it's pretty equal. Neither one of us likes to be late. We're very prompt and punctual, so it's pretty much
So,
we're pretty
no conflict there then.
compatible. Yes.
Oh, good. Who's the better listener? Not that one is bad or one is good, but which one is the better listener?
I don't know. I don't feel unlistened to. I mean, I don't know.
I think in my job, it's really about listening.
Right.
That's sort of one area of life. Gerri has numerous people she ministers to, individuals as well. And so there's a ton of listening in that. In terms of listening to each other, we're probably like most married couples. Some days we're doing that really well, and other days, when you have kids and you're so busy, there are times you're just passing in the night. But we both try to listen really well.
Good. So was it, back to how you met, was it love at first sight, or did it take a little bit?
Okay, so I'm going to tell this one. So he gets dramatic with it. It was not love at first sight. So we had these mutual friends, and so there would be some church event, and so we would meet at this event, and the mutual friend, whatever, would introduce us. And according to him, I forgot him like about 3 times, about 3 introductions or so. So on about the 4th introduction, I really noticed him. Something clicked, and I noticed him, and I noticed he had a very kind face, and so then I kind of became interested. So.
That is the very short version.
It'll stay right there.
But I will tell you that when she did notice me, we were actually at a friend's house emptying his waterbed to move it. Mm-hmm. And she came in the door, a bunch of people there, and I'm sort of trying to get the air out of the waterbed mattress. I look up and I see her look at me, and I go, wow, for the first time she noticed me.
Very nice.
I didn't know what it meant, and it wasn't like, oh, she's the one. But I noticed that she noticed.
Good. So you guys mentioned communicator, both good listeners. What would you say? I mean, what would you tell couples are some keys to successful communication in marriage?
I'll let you go.
Yeah, let me go. I mean, there's just a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
So many things over a long period of any relationship, but especially marriage. There just got to be a lot of grace and a lot of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. We go through ups and downs and lots of pressure. And I tell people it's, if Gerri wants to, she could point out a ton of things I've done wrong and done poorly. Frankly, they're balanced by some things I've done well, right? And she, I think, would say the same thing. And so I think there just needs to be a lot of grace and kindness, forgiveness, and
good.
I don't know.
Gerri, what would you say about communication?
Just work at it. It's not something I think in communication you have to be vulnerable. and I'm not the best at being vulnerable. And so I have to work at it really hard sometimes if there are tough issues or things that may be more difficult to say and communicate, but you just keep doing it, you know?
Yeah.
That's true. We're both very much introverts. And so we bring that into the marriage, and we're used to being self-sufficient. We got married at an older age. So I was 32 and Gerri was 27. And so we had lived a lot of life as adults before we got married. And so there's just a lot of learning to do and overcoming our natural tendencies.
So looking back, what are some of the things that, and maybe that's part of your answer, but what are some of the things you would probably do a little bit differently? With the perspective of time and looking back, what would you say? You know what, I as a husband, I would have done this, or as a wife, I probably would have done this a little bit differently.
Well, I think the independence that he talked about kind of comes into play there. So because we both are very independent, our whole family, the whole family of four is that way. It's just amazing. It has its strengths, but it also has its weaknesses, because you can kind of go off and do your own thing. And be quite happy doing your own thing, you know? And so I think that, and still, we need to work harder to not do our own thing and be satisfied, but to, find a lot of common things. So raising kids, a lot of that commonality was in raising kids. We pursued that with a passion together. And so we have to continue to find things that we can both do together that we enjoy, and not be so independent. That it can have its drawbacks.
Tom, what would you say?
I think she's right. I think that's right. I notice in myself, I can go long periods sort of self-contained, and kind of what she's describing. And that's not really a good recipe for a couple. I mean, there are positive attributes to it, right? Positive, but it needs to be balanced by intentional interdependence, if you will. So I think we could do better.
What would you say has been some of the key strengths to you guys making it 29 years, and hopefully, many more to come after that? But what have been some of the keys to success for you guys for making it that long?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot. I think our shared faith, we are dedicated to growing in our faith individually, and we instill that in our family values, if you will. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. I think the major things of life we agreed on, and that's big. I think we supported each other. Now, I mean, sure, we made mistakes now and again, but fundamentally, Gerri had my back. She always did, and I think I had hers, and that showed up in how we raised kids, but it showed up in other areas too. Very, very important. I think when we did have issues or disagreements, our natural tendency was to reconcile, right? Even though we talk about being independent, we're also very much dedicated. It's a lifelong commitment, and we both had that, and we've never wavered from that.
And you have to overlook a lot, just choose grace. Because I know that I'm bound to do a lot of things that irritate him that I'm not even aware of. He does a few things that might irritate me, and most of them really don't matter. I can choose to make them an issue, or I can overlook them. And I think the other thing is that I realized, I don't know, actually a couple of years ago, I realized that I was sometimes not assuming the best. And there was a specific example that happened, and I realized, wow, I just was assuming the worst in that situation. And so I've been very cognizant, just assume the best, and rather than the contrary. So that was kind of a revelation too.
Those are two good things there. You both said something. So Tom, you mentioned about our desire, or I forget how you said it, but basically our dedication was always to reconcile. It wasn't to stay angry, to stay mad, to stay upset, but that was your tendency, and that's so huge. And then what you just mentioned, Gerri, just the assuming the best, because when negativity gets into marriage, man, it can destroy it so fast and eat at it away. And so I think those are two extremely good points that you brought up. If you don't mind sharing, you both mentioned doing some things, maybe some conflict that you have. All relationships have conflict, but what is kind of seems to be the one conflict that keeps arising in your marriage, even after 29 years, right? Just the one thing that this tends to be the thing that we kind of just butt heads. Not that you have these knockdown, drag out fights, but we just kind of still butt heads on this thing or this issue.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought about this hard. Both of us have very high standards for ourselves and for what we do. I call it a perfectionist complex. We want to get everything straight, everything right, and we hold ourselves to a high standard. And that's mostly good. But occasionally in our relationship, it gets hard because we see that in the other and they're not perfect. I'm not perfect and she's not perfect. And so it interrupts the flow of grace in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be easier for us to say, I'm not perfect. I messed up. Forgive me. Or if it was the other shoe, I forgive you. I still love you. Let's go on. Mm. And I think I could have done that, but I still can do that better than I have done it. Yeah, I think that's a big one.
Yeah, and I think one of the other issues that we'll come back to is the timing of large expenditures. We kind of have I don't know, it sort of was an unspoken agreement, but it's just, we both abide by it. We don't make large purchases without total agreement. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, we're both very frugal, so that's not the issue, but it's a matter of timing of when we make these expenditures. And I like to say I'm the gas and he's the brakes. So
that's a good way of putting it.
We do come back to that every once in a while.
I like that. So, or one way that I'll say it is, Gerri, you're the dreamer, and Tom, you're the dream killer. Is that how it kind of works? Something like that?
Yeah. I might work on the phrasing a little bit. Didn't seem all that complimentary. We typically, sometimes that gets reversed on us, though, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm ready to go and she's not. So
yeah. I love what you said about the perfectionist in you, that shuts off the flow of grace, and that's a huge deal. And I know there's a lot of couples that identify with that we want things to go a certain way, and when they don't work the certain way that we want it to go, or it's not exactly what we thought, or all those things, it can just shut down. We get focused on that, kind of back to what Gerri was saying a little bit, get focused on the negative, and we forget to extend grace to one another and know that perfection is really not something that can be attained. So we really do have to be gracious with one another. That's good. Quickly on in-laws, what would you say to couples who maybe are struggling with in-law issues, or just kind of wondering about, okay, how do I relate best to my in-laws? And I'm asking this from you guys having in-laws, not you, because I know you said that your daughter's married now. So I'm not asking about you being in-laws, but I'm just asking about you dealing with your in-laws.
You or me?
That's a tough one, I think, because honestly, we've been very blessed to have good relationships, both of us, with our respective in-laws, and so I haven't had a whole lot of conflict. I think just anybody that you deal with, you're going to have times where you're going to need to extend grace. You're going to need to not assume the worst. And in relationships that, where you deal with people over and over, like in-laws, it could be that you start assuming the worst. And so there are a few times I have done that, and then I've had to catch myself. But honestly, we've been very blessed in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. If to a younger couple, I would say your in-laws are really important. They're not as important as your spouse. Mm-hmm. And you need to be very clear about that. right? So we both had cases where we've had to go time out, no, and just say that we are to each other, we're the most important thing, and you need to respect that. We haven't had big issues with that, but that's one thing. And I think the second then is to respect them, because you learn, and then you know this, Jimmy, but when you get married, you marry a family. Mm-hmm. And so there's always accommodation in that. Mm-hmm. And you just have to be reconciled to that you're going to accommodate these new relationships and get over yourself and go do it.
Good. So you mentioned two adult children and who are doing great. So how did having kids, raising kids, how did that affect your marriage, and how did you handle it when maybe you didn't see eye to eye on how to raise those kids?
So this sounds all Pollyanna, but we were in pretty clear agreement on our kids. Good. I mean, again, we were older, and I think we had, processed what we were hoping for, and it took us a while to have kids, even after we got married. One of the things that we did, in fact, Gerri talked to me after we were married, but before we had kids. She came to me one day and said, I've been thinking about if and when we have children, something I want to do. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, I want to homeschool. And I think you were nervous.
I was very nervous to tell him.
But I knew my wife. I knew that if she were dedicated to homeschooling, she would do it well. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't hard for me to go, I'm good with, if you're going to be dedicated, right? Which, that's going to be okay with me. And she was dedicated. I mean, in some senses, that's the crown jewel of our life, raising our children. And so homeschooling was part of it, but in all the details of raising the kids, we were, I don't know. I don't remember misalignment.
Yeah, I think being unified is key. And there were times if there were areas where we just needed to discuss, like where we were, what we thought. It was all done behind the scenes. It wasn't done in front of the kids. And we presented a unified front to the kids, and they just got that. I'm not aware of them running to the other and to try to get something or whatever. I think the only time our unification broke down involved a dog. And that's a whole other story. So.
Yeah, if you want to know the dog story, you can ask that question.
Okay, I'll ask you next time I see you.
Yeah.
So next time. So you guys have the perspective of raising kids and now dealing with adult kids. So give me a little bit of something for parents, just some advice for parents who are raising younger, and then give me some advice for parents who now have adult children. Just something quick that you would say, hey, here's some wisdom that we've learned or we picked up.
I think with younger children, I think we have to remember that as parents, our calling, our primary calling as parents is to teach them about God first and foremost. That is our prime responsibility. And I think that we need to be consistent in taking them to church. And when I mean consistent, I mean every Sunday. That's just what our family does, is we go to church. And that as parents, we realize that it's not the church's responsibility to teach my kids about God, but it's mine to teach them and to model it. And then when I take them to church, it is fortified, or it's further instilled in them. So reinforced at church. And so those are primary things. And then I would just say letting your life be total. I won't say totally without hypocrisy. I guess we can't do that. But what we say and do at church in front of our church friends, and then what we say and do at home need to align, because our kids get it. When we say that this is our value and this is what's important to us, and then we do something else that shows that our relationship with God is not the most important, they get it. They pick up on all these things. So just being consistent in our walk with the Lord in front of them, I think is really crucial.
And I would say this, I agree with all of that. That's dead on. but saying something to them, sort of like I said about in-laws, which is, kids, we love you dearly. We would give our lives for you. You're not as important as my wife.
Right.
And we had these, particularly with my son at one time when he was very young. If you don't treat my wife well, you can't live here.
Mm.
And I think it made a mark on him. We didn't want to, and a good mark.
Right.
But I think they get great confidence, derive great confidence if they see that they are not number one.
That's good.
Not.
That's good.
As adult children,
yeah, go ahead.
We're just new on that. And we're trying to understand what it means to let them be free, because for 20 something years, they've been our focus, and learning what it means to have a son-in-law, and don't call them too much, but make sure they know we still care. And
yeah.
I don't know. We're trying to sort it out. You'll get there pretty soon.
Oh yeah.
Our in-laws gave us good examples that I think we're trying to follow. And I told this to my daughter when she got married. I said, both sets of our parents, they didn't place expectations on us. And so going forward with your new husband, we will try our best to do that, to not place expectations on you and let you forge your way with your husband and your family. And so, like you said, we're new at this, and so we don't claim to be experts, but we do have some guides from our parents that I think were good.
That's
true. Good. That's good. So I don't know that, just full disclosure here, I sent these questions to the Hawes, and I do this for all the couples that we're going to interview. But one I didn't really include, and I'm going to spring it on you. So you have a unique story in going through your health journey. And so what was that like on your marriage? If you don't mind sharing just a little bit about that, and how that impacted your relationship.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So that the whole journey there at at different points in time. So our faith was immediately, for those who don't know, so Tom received a very devastating cancer prognosis. And basically we were told he was not going to live. And so it really, it's just a ton of bricks was dumped on us. And so as individuals, we had to process that. As a couple, we had to process that. And at the time we had a 2 and a 3-year-old. And we had to continue on with life and figure out how to go on. And so our faith was integral to us, God sustaining us through that and teaching us individually. And there were times when I saw, God working in each, in me, for example, and Tom was at a different place in his struggle with the cancer diagnosis. So sometimes I feel like we were sort of not on the same page in that regard, because God was working in each one of us uniquely and in a different timetable. But on the other hand, it brought us together in lots of ways as well. So it was kind of a, I don't know, push and pull, or I don't know how you describe it, but
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's a real gift, right? I mean, you think you're dying or whatever, you begin sorting your life out really quickly. This doesn't matter. That's it, trivial, blah, blah, blah. But this is important, right? And this is important. And that's a great gift. I can remember the clarity that I felt in those times. And one of the this is important kinds of things was your family. I mean, it's the legacy you have with your marriage and with your children. It's much more important than your job. It's much more important than your income. It's much more important than your house or your car. Making the list. And so for me, it was a midlife gift to say, don't lose track of that.
Right.
Don't lose track of what's most important and what will last beyond this life. And so it even affects my job today, where I tell men and women that run businesses that there's so much of what you do is very temporal. It's temporary, but you have the opportunity to do things that are eternal. And so that's how it affected me. And then I think it made me focus more on Gerri and the kids as compared to things that were frankly less important.
It had a great impact on the kids in ways that honestly I see today are good. They had to struggle with whether their daddy was going to die. And Catherine particularly had some experiences truly with the Lord. It's, again, that's a whole other story, but things that she would tell us that she was processing, that it was only the Lord ministering to her. So we got to see so many things through that time that were just incredible. As painful as it was, there's the pain and all that you don't know. There's so much, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of just everything was hanging in the balance, from surgery to experimental treatment, and just so much unknown. And yet at the same time, God brought peace to all that chaos in just astounding ways. So it impacted our family in a lot of ways.
That's good. That's good. Thanks for answering that. I'm going to ask you one more question, and it's an obvious, I assume based on everything that you've said, it's an obvious question, but how has your relationship with the Lord impacted your marriage?
Me? I would say it this way, Jimmy. I came into the marriage as an unfinished product. Very much so, rough around the edges, not in terms of, I don't know, coarse language or terrible habits, but just spiritually rough. God has used the marriage. I mean, there's so much that I've learned from Gerri spiritually. I tell this story of before I met her, I'd go to church at Prestonwood and I'd throw $5 in the offering plate, think I'd done the right thing. And, I was a good Christian. I've learned so much about giving from her. Right? And so she's taught me a ton about that. But just the refining that God does as we go through life and we go through our marriage, I hope you would say that I'm different than I used to be.
Absolutely.
So
am I.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's that constant refining, trying to be more like the image of Christ that we get in the New Testament. Kinder, all the fruits of the Spirit, right? All of those things. And so I think that's how it's affected me. It's just a constant reminder to be like Christ, to exhibit fruits of the Spirit, and to do that with my mate.
That's good.
Marriage and having children is very sanctifying,
Yes.
So if you look at it that way, and when difficult times come and when, the anger flashes and you get to practice giving grace and forgiveness and turning the other cheek, it's very sanctifying. So I think our perspective has a lot to do with it, but, of how, when difficulties come, how we choose to respond, but, being committed to Christ, being Christ followers and choosing to do it to the best of our ability, his way, means that we do learn to extend grace and do these things that do not come naturally. So without a faith in Christ, I don't know why I would want to do that.
Yeah. So. That's so good. And one of the things that you guys have said is this: you agree on the big things. And I think that a lot of that has to do with your faith in God. You're both starting from the same foundation. And so it just not that it made marriage easier, but it made the load a whole lot lighter because you're both starting from the same place. And I think that's huge. And a lot of problems are solved or maybe even avoided sometimes because you are coming from the foundation of Christ, and that's where it's at. So I think that's good. Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this for our viewing audience, whoever that is. But thank you for being a part of this, and I know there's a lot of great stuff that couples are going to benefit from doing this. So I appreciate you guys a lot.
We sure hope so.
Hope so.
we don't see ourselves as models, but thank you for asking us.
Of course.